Welcome to the solution video for the SQL to-do list challenge. Let's go over to Visual Studio and we'll do a new project. And we're going to create a database project. So we're looking for the SQL database project, SQL Server database project right here, which in the newest version of Visual Studio, and again, I'm running preview version, so it may be a little bit different for you. But in the newest version, it's tagged in mine as query language as one of the tags. So you could look for just query language in, languages, sorry, right there, query language. And that should be able to filter it down a little bit more for you. But SQL Server Database Project is fine. Hit Next. We're going to call this our SQL To-Do Challenge. And the SQL To-Do Challenge app. And once it's created, we're going to scaffold out our basic project. So we're going to right-click and add a folder. We'll call it DBO. And then inside here, we're going to create another folder for tables. I'm just going to do tables and stored procedures. And that's it. And the reason why is because that's all we'll have in this database. So that's good enough for now. Let's create one more folder on the outside, and this will be for our publish profile, which we don't have yet, but we will. Now let's right-click and add a table. So our first table is going to be, let's create our first table as the users table. And the reason why users first is because I'm going to link to the user ID in the to-do list. So I don't want to have that set up quite yet, not before I have my users table. So let's make this identity. That makes it auto-incrementing by 1. And by now, if you've been doing the challenges, this is fairly simple stuff. It's the basic get you started stuff because we've been doing it over and over again. But each challenge gives you something different or unique to look at. And this one's no different. We're going to link in our users and we're going to have the status of the record. We can delete it, but it still needs to be in the table, that kind of stuff. So this is the basic stuff right here. So default value is going to be 0 for is complete. And then we have the owner ID. And this is an integer, and it's not going to be null, and it's going to be a foreign key for the users table. Now I don't have a status ID yet, but I'm going to. So let's do this. Let's save this. And let's add that status table. The reason I want to add a status table is because I want to know if this record is active or has been deleted. And you may ask, well, can't you just delete it if you don't want it here anymore? And the answer is no. I want to keep a record of even my deleted records. And that's pretty common in the industry because you don't want to delete records that maybe have links somewhere else, or it may show a history. So let's say you bought something at the store. You bought a candy bar. And then later you come back and say, you know what? I don't want this candy bar anymore. And you return it. They wouldn't delete the original transaction. They would just say this transaction has been returned. Because it still happened. So if you create a to-do, that was there at one point. If you delete it, okay, you don't want to see it anymore, but we still want to have record that you saw this at one point. Imagine if you're a kid and you've been given a list of 10 tasks to do, one of which is take out the garbage, which you hate to do. If your parent comes to you and says, let's look at your to-do list and see what you have left to do, if you can just delete off that take out the trash, then it looks like you're completing the tasks that you've been assigned. But if you go and look at the behind the scenes, you'll see, oh wait, you deleted a task. You didn't do it, you just deleted it. So there's a lot of reasons why we don't want to just allow a full-on delete, but instead we're going to do a status of active versus deleted. So let's create a new table. And this is going to be the status table, or statuses, since we have all plural. And make it identity. And status name. And varchar 50 is fine. So that status table, really simple. Now you can come back over here and say status ID int, and that's going to identify what the status of our record is. I won't give it a default value, but we do need to require that value. All right, after that, I want to have a few dates. So date created, date time 2, and I'll set this as get UTC date as a default value. So that's date created, date deleted. And I'm going to leave that nullable and not give it a default value. Now you may ask, well, Tim, why do we have a status column if you're going to have a date deleted? Because you could just say if it's null, then it's not been deleted. And I get that logic. The problem is that I also understand software development. And unless you specifically say a date is nullable inside C#, if you were to create a model that had all these as properties and you didn't make the date deleted nullable, if it was empty, it would give a value of the default minimum value for a date. So either it would be January 1st, the year 1, or it might be January 1st, the year 1970, depending on a couple different factors. But either way, that's a date. And so now you've marked every record as deleted. We don't want to rely on that as a reliable indicator that it is in fact deleted. So you could say, well, just tell the users, tell the developers to do it right. That's all well and good. Here's the reality of it. They're going to screw it up. I screw it up, so they're going to screw it up. So we're going to have a status column too. Okay, and finally, no, that's it. I think that's all we need for right now. Now let's create one more root level folder here, and this is going to be for scripts. And inside here, I'm going to create a post deploy script. So post deployment script, and the name isn't important, so I'm just going to call it the add status records.sql. And this is going to add records to the status table. So if not exists, select one from dbo.statuses, begin, end. So if there's no records in the statuses table, then I'm going to do an insert into dbo.statuses, and I believe it is status name. Yep. And the values are going to be, the first value is active. The second value is going to be deleted. That's all the stats I really need right now. So this will run every time I publish this database. And it's going to fill up the status table with some basic statuses. Now I could do the same for users and to-dos. I'm not going to do that. This makes sense even for a real database because of the fact that it's basically a drop down and it's got some hard code values in there. Let's publish this. Publish. We're going to publish this to our local DB. So ms local DB, and we'll give it a name of SQL to do challenge. We're going to save this profile, and we're going to save it to the publish profiles location and hit save. And now it's there, so we can double click it and run it, or we can just hit publish now. It's going to create for us a database over here in this list, which it's already created, it looks like. Go to tables, there's our 3 tables, and if we look at statuses, the data, we'll see we have 2 statuses, one of active and one of deleted. So that really wraps up the primary challenge. We've built the tables to hold the to-dos, the users who own them, and when the to-do is completed, we've captured that, and also if and when it was deleted. Actually, you know what? We didn't capture one thing, and that is the date completed. I missed that. Date completed. There we go. And we'll leave that as null because if it's not complete, we won't have a date there. All right, so that's more like it. Let's publish those changes. Now we've completed the primary challenge. Now it's on to the bonus challenge. And this is where we make use of what we already have and add to it. And the biggest thing we're going to add here is the ability to have recurring to-dos. The idea that, you know what, take out the kitchen trash, that's more than a once in a lifetime thing. That's a every week thing or every day thing or however fast you create trash in your house. Same thing with mowing a lawn. If you have grass, you know that whenever it's summertime, whenever the grass is growing, that task is pretty regular. So we're going to create recurring tasks for this database. Now, right now we have the idea of one task per row. It's just the name and who owns it, if it's complete or not, and what the status is. That's pretty basic stuff, but how do we add recurring in here? Well, what I'm going to do is actually create another table that will populate this table. And the idea is not to touch this functionality too much because this works. To-dos works. And this also, the bonus challenge kind of brings into light the idea that you modify something over time. Well, you can't just throw out the database you have to kind of work with it. Well, if we're going to add recurring to-dos on top of this, we don't want to modify what's already working, which is the to-do list. So let's create a new table. We're going to call it to-do template or templates. And this will be a template of a to-do, which we will then use to populate our to-dos as the date comes up. So, to-do text. Sounds familiar? Varchar, and again, that's going to be 100, and it's not null. After that, we need the owner ID. Looking familiar so far? Well, sure, because we're going to have to populate this table with information from this table. So therefore, we have to have kind of a mirror going on. All right, next. We need the date deleted, date time 2, and that's null, or nullable at least. And then we need the status ID, because this has a status as well, because you could, in theory, mark this as deleted. That's the date deleted. So the recurring task is getting deleted. And we're not going to make that nullable, but we're not going to give it a default value. And then we also need to have a last created date. And this is the last time that the item was created. So if you have a task of taking out the kitchen trash every 7 days, and we're using this template table to add to this table on intervals. And that recurring to-do creates a to-do. We want to put the template ID in there so we know, okay, this to-do was created from this template. And that just allows us to associate so that when we say this template, how many times have we created to-dos from it and what are the status of those to-dos? Well, we can look at the ID of the template record. Let's say the ID is 15. We go over to the to-dos table and say, give me all the records where the template ID is 15. And now there's all the to-dos that have been created based upon that template and what their statuses are. Now let's do this. Let's save this and we're going to publish this. And the reason why is I'm going to add some dummy data just to make sure that our stored procedures are going to work right. So make sure I have some data in here. So let's go to the to-dos first. I'm going to create a to-do without a template. So the to-do text is going to be wash my car. Is complete is going to be 0, so nothing. The owner ID, whoops, I need to create an owner, so let's do that. So users, view data, Tim, Corey, and Sue Storm. All right, so 1 and 2. So this one is going to be owner ID of 1, status ID of 1, which is active, date create we can leave alone. We can leave all the rest of this stuff alone, and it creates it for us. So we can, it's not complete. The owner ID is Tim. The status ID is 1 or active. The date create is right there. And then the date deleted, the date completed, and the template ID are all null. Now let's create another one. And this will be for Sue. So let's say that Sue is going to be buy a house. That's a pretty big to-do. It's not complete. The owner is Sue. The status is active. And that's it. So now there's 2 standalone to-dos. They don't have template IDs. Now let's go create some templates. So view data. And the to-do text, let's just say take out trash. The owner ID is Tim. The interval in days is going to be, you know what? every day. So we don't have any smells in the house. Date created is going to be right now. Status ID is going to be 1 for active. Last created is null. Let's pretend that this has been created for a while. So what I'm going to do is say that 8/1/19 for August 1st of 2019. I'm going to leave just that one to do. We're not going to go crazy creating all this data. Let's come back over here, though. Actually, I'm going to copy this first. Come back over to my to-dos. I'm going to take out the trash. I'm going to say that complete is 1. The owner ID is 1. The status ID is 1. It's still active even though it's been completed. And the date created is 8/1/19. So I'm actually creating when the date was. It's not been deleted. The date completed was 8/2/19. In your calculations, this could be important because maybe you say that interval is going to be based upon the last completed one. So it's completed on the 2nd. We don't want to assign another one for the 2nd. We want to assign 1 to the 3rd. And the template ID, I believe, is going to be 1. Let's go look and make sure. Yes, it's 1. So 1. I'm going to create a few more of these. Now I'm just roughing this in to kind of fake it to make it. Take out the trash again. We're going to say that it is false. No, let's say true. One more for true. The owner ID is still 1. The status ID is still 1. The date created is 8/7/19. And 8/7/19. I actually did it on the day that time. Template ID is 1. And then we're going to add a few more with zeros for complete. Status ID is 1. This was assigned on 8/15, but it has not been completed. It is a status or a template ID of 1. And one more. So we have it. Status ID of 1. And this is going to be 8/21/19. And again, it's for that template. So what this does, it gives us a couple of completed to-dos from that template and a couple of incomplete to-dos from that template. So 2 are marked as true as complete. 2 are marked as false incomplete. And that will just allow us to more easily query our data when we create the store procedures that we need to for this lookup. All right, so let's close all but this. Keep this one open. I'm going to create a store procedure. And this store procedure is going to be, let's call it SP lookup by ID. And we're going to pass in a user ID as an integer. And from that, we're going to tell you what to-dos you have in the system that are active. All right, set no count on, then select. Let's select star to begin with from dbo.todos. I'm going to name this, let's go with T. Inner join dbo.users u on u.id equals t.owner ID. And one more, and that is inner join dbo.statuses s on s.id equals t.status ID. And that'll give us some more user-friendly information for our to-dos. And finally, where t.owner ID equals at user ID. And then up here, we're going to say t dot, and we're going to go crazy here. We're going to say the to-do text, and let's have the date created as well. the t.date created. Interesting, it's showing me, oops, I was thinking that was created, but it's deleted. Date created, there we go. So date created, and then let's also go for s.status name. And we can even rename that to be as status and put that in quotes. That way it's a more user-friendly name than status name. So let's publish this. And now I can come over here to our stored procedures and we can execute this. We can pass in the user ID of 1 for Tim and see that Tim has these 4 active tasks. Now it did not return any non-active tasks, but let's look at our data here and see I do have some non-active tasks. The is complete right here. It looks like it hasn't returned any. I just have, this is all status ID, not is complete. So let's change that. So we can come back over here. We won't save that. We can come back over here and make sure that not only is it the user ID, we're going to say and t.isComplete equals false. Actually equals 0. There we go. We can save that. We can republish it. We can come back over here, execute this again, pass in the ID of 1 for Tim, and get just 3 records this time, the 3 that are active and not complete. If we were to run it again, but this time pass in Sue Storm's ID, oops, I shouldn't have hit play. Wrong play button. All right, if we hit this play button here, now it says just 1 record, which is buy a house. We also can modify this like so. That way it doesn't have that second return set. I intentionally don't return a value. So with this, we're now just seeing just the active records that are not complete. Now let's create a second stored procedure. So add a new stored procedure. And for this one, this is going to be SP history by ID, by template ID. So this is going to be at template ID. That's an integer. We're going to have a begin, an end. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the, wow, I'm clicking all over here. Get rid of this one. I want this right here, because it really is almost the same query. In fact, I can grab the set no count on too. There we go. And instead of looking at by the owner ID, what we're going to do is we're going to look at it by instead the template ID. And we're going to say that it has to be complete as, incomplete, and t dot is, or status ID, and that status ID needs to equal 1. We should probably add that to the other one as well, because we want only the active statuses. We don't want the ones that have been deleted. So let's add that as well. So now we're looking for the same information, the to-do text, the date created, the status name for all of these. Only instead of status name, we actually want to capture, well, no, we don't want to have the the completed tasks. So we're verifying that, okay, no, I'm sorry. I got confused on my own directions. Imagine that. So the history is going to look up the complete history, whereas the lookup is only looking for the active status. So we don't want to do either of these. We want to look at the incomplete history, not just the ones that are active. So we'll look at the status, and we'll also look up whether or not it's complete. So t.is complete as well. Now let's save those, and we'll publish this. And now, if we refresh, unfortunately, it refreshes the entire thing. So this is the SQL to do challenge, programming, or programmability actually, by template ID, execute, and we're going to say the value of template ID is 1. It's the only one we have. We hit OK. Let's get rid of this real quick and run it again. I could have done a query window, probably been easier. So now we have the complete history of this template. So take out the trash is the text itself. I created it on the 1st, the 7th, the 15th, and the 21st. All 4 of these are active. None have been deleted. That's good. But 2 have been complete and 2 are incomplete. So there we go. That completes the bonus challenge. So we've created a table for to-dos with all the information about to-do. We've linked in the statuses table and the users table for identifying who owns a to-do and what the status is of that to-do. And we also create on top of it this to-do templates table, which will create to-dos on a schedule. And here's how we set the schedule: interval in days and when it was last created. So that completes the bonus challenge and the primary challenge. Hopefully that gave you a little bit of a challenge, and at the same time grew and stretched your knowledge of SQL and the SQL data tools inside of Visual Studio. Thanks for watching, and as always, I am Tim Corey.